Buenas tardes.
Okay, so good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this roundtable. We're going to be chit-chatting a little bit about limits, science, boundaries that science has, complexity, through different disciplines. I'm going to introduce the people that are with me today. I apologize because of the delay in getting started. Well, you know, trips, journeys, you know how all this works. And we're going to have around 50 minutes, 50, during which we will have interventions by the people that are part of this roundtable, of this panel, and we will give some time for a quick Q&A session by the audience. Remarks, whatever you deem as appropriate, as far as they are not very long. Okay, we have limited time, and of course we have some speakers that have already been picked up, and this selection, well, I'm going to introduce them right now. We have Sonia Contera, who's a physicist. She's a professor at the Oxford University in the UK. She studied at the Autonomous University of Madrid. She continued studying in Moscow, Prague, and Beijing. And she took her PhD at Osaka University, where she dealt with the fascinating world of nanotechnology. Since 2003, she's been investigating and teaching at Oxford, where she leads pioneer projects in the intersection between physics, biology, and nanotechnology, with applications in medicine and bio-inspired materials. She's the author of the books Living Nanotechnology and the recently published 6 Problems That Science Can't Solve. That is, it will be the first thing that we will ask. And she collaborates as a writer for El País newspaper. Welcome, Sonia.
Sí, ¿por qué no? Más a la derecha.
So to the right we have Christophe Galfard. He is a physicist and he's a writer. He comes from France. He has a PhD in theoretical physics by the University of Cambridge. So we have neighbors from Cambridge and Oxford, where he took his PhD about black holes and to the professorship of Mr. Stephen Hawking. Today he is a writer. He combines accuracy and creativity to bring cosmology to the large audience. So he has sold more than 2 million books all around the globe, and he has offered conferences in 4 continents. 4. It seems that it's just 4. Okay, so among his works, we have The Universe in Your Hand, maybe his most famous work. And last but not least, we have Dolores Albarracín. She is a social psychologist specialized in social cognition, communication, and change in behavior. She's a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and she is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Science, as well as other scientific institutions. She has more than 200 publications, many awards, like dinner, and the ones that have been given by the Society of Social Psychology and Personality more recently, and maybe this is why you know her about, the BBVA Award Fronteras del Conocimiento in Social Sciences in last year, 2025. Her research about behavior change in health has received more than $40 million in federal funding. So it's like obscene speaking about money, right? But it's quite a big deal because this is going to emerge during the conversation very probably. So since 2023, she manages the Journal of Personality in Social Psychology. She's the author of 6 books, among which we have Action and Inaction in a Social World and Creating Conspiracy Beliefs. So we have 3 amazing CVs with us, 3 people that, well, I know that quite capable to communicate their science and their knowledge quite well, and we will be very brief at the beginning, and then we will be a little bit more relaxed. So let's see where this takes us, and let's see how this evolves by the audience and by our side. So let's get started with boundaries, with limits. So the previous roundtable has talked about this, and the first question that I will ask to each and one of our speakers is, well, of course they will be able to answer this question, and if they have any other remark, that will be more than welcome, is, within your disciplines, within your own disciplines, I'll address people that speak in Spanish. Well, I will address them informally, so for you to understand. So, among your expertise, what boundaries are the most significant ones, or I would say, what limits are the most limiting ones in your fields of expertise or in your career? Theoretical limits, okay, limits in knowledge in your area. For example, Sonia.
Well, I devote my work to the physics of the living world and how life, in order to survive, how does it need to understand what's around it, from bacteria to even to the human beings. And out of this question, there are many questions unanswered that are at the core of my specialty and at the core of the many challenges of sciences at the moment. These questions are first raised at the beginning of the 20th century when the physics goes to general relativity. Time, space, and gravity are interconnected, and they are not what they seem to be. Time is a curve, etc., etc. And also quantum mechanics at the beginning of the 20th century. Scientists can reach very small scales, and what they find at the scale and what we have been questioning since is that what are the most important things for people from the times of enlightenment, which it was to understand the external world through reason, is completely broken. So quantum mechanics, time, causality, effect do not work as they used to. And the time itself is not the time that we were used to that moves forward. And also at the same time, this depends on the way that you take the measurements. Physics stops being objective. It demonstrates that science cannot be completely unbiased, and this breaks with all the ideals of the Enlightenment. And this is one the main problem that leads to the next unsolved questions. What is life? How does life come about? And how a living being can be capable of processing, for instance, our brain to process a lot of information with less energy than the energy that very bulb needs, for instance, and learn from many few things. And ChatGPT actually needs all the books in the world and nuclear plants in order to be able to learn. And this is the question about conscience and how we feel one. And all these things are interconnected, from quantum mechanics, information, and the staying alive, and to move time forward.
Well, quite a big deal, right? So, Christophe, according to your experience in the world of cosmology, what are the boundaries of the knowledge that you would like to explore? What questions, up to now, we have not been able to answer, and I would like to highlight until now. Do we have questions that have not been solved until now? And is there any question that has not been solved and that we will never be able to answer?
Short answers, no.
Yo no estoy de acuerdo, pero bueno.
I disagree, but anyway.
What I find funny about all this is that every time humanity lives a certain period, it has some ideas about reality. We all do. From birth to death, we belong to a time that has a vision about reality. And that's always been the case. But it's never been the same vision. The vision evolves all the time. And what I find extraordinary is that we actually, as human beings, somehow need a structure in our mind. Whether we like it or not, or whether we understand it or not, we need a structure to make sense of what surrounds us. And as Sonia was saying, until pretty recently, about 100 years ago, the reality we had access to was the reality that corresponded to what we can detect through our bodies, through our senses. So everything we understand, even today, our intuition could work to explain things around us. There were some mysteries, but we could explain. About 100 years ago, we went beyond that. We went beyond our senses in pretty much every single direction of scientific knowledge. And then it became worse and worse with decades. And from biology to cosmology to even the idea that our universe has a history that we've known for 100 years, about 100 years. We didn't know that before. We didn't even know that in the very small, the laws that Sonia talked about, the laws of quantum physics, are actually different from the ones that exist in our daily lives. We could have expected something to be continuous as far as we go. It's not the case. It's different. So we need to get used to this idea and to be humble again, thinking that what we find beyond what we know may be completely different from anything we've known until today. Now, you talk about cosmology. The reason why there are limits is because we have a structure in our mind, because we try to understand the world we see, and we need to put some kind of scaffolding, some kind of laws, but they're never perfect. And there is always a limit. But the limits we have today are way further than any limits that have existed before. In that sense, I would say that the limits always are within the theories we have. Nature itself may or may not have any. So if you ask me what the big question marks about the limits might be, I would ask whether mathematical physics can go all the way through. We do not know. It's worked so far, every single time. Will it continue to work? I don't know. I believe so, but we don't know. And within cosmology, there are, let's say, two places that are theoretically difficult that are the mysteries of today. There are the beginning, the initial condition maybe, and the limits within the theory itself, and what the universe contains. Because what we see does not correspond to what we expect. So we have to introduce things to make sense of what we see. Things that are mysterious, things that are so big that everything we've learned so far since humanity arrived or began to think, everything we've learned is about something around 5% of what apparently there is. Mm-hmm. So either there's loads of mystery that we need to find, or we need to find another theory to explain it all.
Okay, we'll set some limit. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that it was Michael Atiyah who said that scientists start from faith dogma, that is that the universe is understandable. Wasn't it Attila? No, Sonia says that he wasn't. I think it was Atiyah who said that. But anyway, the question for Dolores is, what if, according to your experience, the human and collective behavior is understandable or not? Where are the boundaries of that understanding?
Yes, it is understandable within many methodological and theoretical boundaries that we handle. For instance, there are several problems that I think are key. One of them is the study of awareness. The psychology is based on an experimental method, but human experience is based on phenomena. And so the study of consciousness is not only based on the questionnaire that tells you about how I feel, and also when we study conscience, we see that it's been transformed. If I ask you, what are you feeling? What you felt 2 seconds earlier has changed just by my question. And this is one of the questions or the issues that psychology is facing since the very beginning, and which is a little bit closer, if you wish, to the physics issue. Secondly, we develop and we look at things along a lifetime, but as we know, there are everything happens at the level of many generations. So the time scale that we're dealing with is wrecked. For instance, the suicide rate studies are in the United States are based on 5-year period. So it's pointless, it's worthless. But to understand that what you're doing now is based on what the previous generation generations did, the addition of advantages or social disadvantages that have created what we see today. And this is something that at a given time we cannot understand, because there is no follow-up of with such a big time scale, if you wish, or we cannot afford to study such a big time period. And also, when it comes to predicting behavior, we are still not able to predict behaviors to an acceptable level, and that is the basis of all our theories, actually. And in order to achieve that goal, maybe new methods or artificial intelligence could facilitate this in order to be able to predict within space that is like predicting the weather. Predicting human behavior is extremely complex, because it is like a chaos, it is an open system, and so this is what we need, and we need to understand that in order to be able to predict what you're going to be doing tomorrow, what you're going to be, what's going to happen in the next elections, etc., etc.
Would you say that in your field, the current circumstances, both scientific and socio-political, are setting a change in current times? Would you say that this is the case? And that plays a role in what is being researched and how what is researched is being communicated, and how this affects your researches?
In the United States, this is very clear. There is a blacklist at the moment. For instance, I had a grant that was cut on the month of March because I was studying something that is relevant to promote something that was going against the administration. This was something that seemed dangerous to the ministry, to the Secretary of Health, and so they created a list of words that were forbidden. For instance, diverse is one of the words that was forbidden, and when I was doing my grant, I had to sit down with the director of my grant who told me that I needed to remove the word diverse from the grant. But actually the word was something in the line of there are diverse reasons for this to happen. So it didn't have any implication towards diversity, but we needed to remove this from the grant proposal. And we are seeing now that there are different prejudices and there are different ideas that are preventing science from happening. There are many changes like that one, and this is just the world that we're living in, and also the way that science has been applied to groups that were disadvantaged groups within society. But there's also the question of AI advanced models. Some models are pretty easy to create and they can learn to correlate things, etc. But there are other models as well, for instance, for the prediction of drug use or proteins, and the owners are the big tech companies in California, and this is having already an impact, adding biases to the study of things. For instance, the second richest man in the world, the owner of Oracle. This has enormous global implications in all sorts of geopolitical issues, and he has based his institute in Oxford, and this gives a lot of money, and everyone is moving around this. And for what they're looking for is a type of science that uses their models, their data, their correlations, and this is extremely dangerous because we depend on models. For instance, some countries do not have the capability of training these models. In Europe, we are not only servants or subservients in geopolitical terms, but also economically we are dependent from other powers. The decision making when it comes to choosing the path or the journey towards the future has become a dilemma. I don't think that we're talking a lot about ethics, but we are changing it very swiftly. Before, everyone was studying cancer, and now we're studying aging, and because you need the money, and we do depend on money, and since countries are becoming weaker and weaker, and we're moving towards a techno-feudal system, if you wish, the money is devoted to where these techno masters decide.
So you're speaking about limitations not only in the field of expertise but also in scientific practice, right?
Who makes the decision? Because countries seem to be weaker and weaker, and the ones who are deciding what is happening are the oligarchs and the monopolies. And we see that science has also entered 100% into all these new trends. You see that your research is worth the worth of your research depends on how much you publish and how many you can give, and the countries have less decision-making power.
I think that this is a change of time. I don't know what, but it's it's a challenging times, right?
It is a rupture.
So within this, Christophe, I understand that, I don't know if you agree with me, but I think that people that deal with science have to be in dialogue with society, and in some way we need to be able to justify some of the decisions that are made, some of the type of studies that we perform, how we do them, but we should contribute so that scientific knowledge improves the social situation, right? So what's the role of science communication at a massive level, although it's not a very beautiful word, but at a massive level, in a situation in which, well, science is being a little bit on the line, not always from the inner side, but also from the outer side. So what's the role of communication, and what's the challenge for this communication in current situation? For the communication of science, I mean.
I think there are just to jump back on what my neighbors just said, on the one hand, we have some grants that are refused to some research that are completely legitimate. On the other hand, we have a huge amount of money that is rushed into research for a specific purpose and for power in some ways, and from my point of view, there is actually even a third part to all this, which is the manipulation of thoughts, of the massive manipulation of thoughts, and it goes together with the other two, and that's probably where the role of science communicators come in, although we come with a massive disadvantage. Again, just for the same reasons that the money is put massively into disinformation. Which brings me back to something much more general, maybe, about humankind, in the sense that we would never have reached the level of technology we have today had science and knowledge not been transmitted generation after generation. It's impossible to know the things we know in one generation. There's no way. So the reason we know some things about the universe, some things about quantum physics, some things even about psychology and everything, the reason we know that is because we have ancestors who thought about it, who made mistakes, who went into the wrong directions until somebody found, and we remember what works. Mm-hmm. This is the basic level of education. I do believe that's a human right to get that information, that education, and it's very hard to transmit that education, if only because the knowledge we have today is beyond common sense. So it's very easy to appeal to people's common sense in saying things. I'll give you an example, if you want, that brings everything we say together. For instance, take your brain. Your brain is made of quantum particles, and quantum particles can be everything at once. So since they can you can actually, with your brain, use that power to be whatever you want and to maybe have an impact on people. That's something we all would like to be true. It's completely wrong. We have no idea how the quantum effects of nature act on our brains. But it has an appeal to hear that because it gives you a power. Look at the amount of books written about quantum consciousness, quantum medicine, quantum... It's bullshit.
Well, there is an application in quantum medicine now. But anyway.
No, let me specify then what I just said, that you can have some apparatus that uses quantum effects that can look into the brain, that can cure some stuff. Even laser is quantum in basically. But what I'm saying is that the self development things that use quantum stuff is completely bullshit. Just as saying that, look, it's colder now than it was, it's hotter now. Sorry, it's colder this year than last year, so the climate doesn't change. It appeals to. It's easy to appeal to our intuition to say things that are wrong, whereas to try and give all the aspects, just you saying no right now proves the point, in the sense that if you want to be right in science, it's much more difficult because there are many aspects of things, but you can tell a story, and the idea of science communication is not to turn people into immediate doctors or PhD holders or whatever, but to raise critical interest of the information they get. That's the basic, I think, idea, the question.
Dolores, como receptores de esa información.
So they're like receivers of this knowledge, of this information. So society is receiving all this through social media, through the internet. So we receive information through this media that is higher or lower quality compared to a few years ago, more homogeneous, heterogeneous, because sometimes we have the feeling that the information that we received via computers is more homogeneous. I receive the information that is surrounding me, that depends on my track record. So is that the case at a sociological level?
No, but before I would like to touch on the previous topic, which is the role in terms of the communication in order to overcome all the difficulties of misguided beliefs in the general public. I think that first of all, the main role lies in education. The scientific education is really poor, and there's no communicator that can fix that. If people don't understand what is a virus or what is an ARN messenger, there's no possibility of understanding, because I just wanted to point out that that fact. But concerning these filter bubbles and the idea of social media isolating us because we only interact with people who share the same opinions as we have, is something that we tended to believe at the beginning. And it is true that we do have many more digital connection with people who share our thoughts, but by the way that the social media are created, they give you many more connections with people who do not share your beliefs. And so it might seem appealing, this idea of us staying within an echo chamber, but it is not real. When people actually interact and participate, or at least in the United States, which is the environment that I have studied, but I suppose that this happens everywhere in Europe as well, the people who are in social media receive a lot of information that is right about vaccination, more than people who are outside the social media. If they have an ideology that is anti-vaccine, anti-vax ideology, for instance, the most conservative branch of people in the United States who have been upholding anti-vax ideas, when they are within the social media, they are better informed when it comes to being more favorable towards vaccination. So social media are really not the answer to all the issues. It's actually the legacy media, the traditional media in the United States that are the real problem in the United States. And there is the is fake news. It is not Facebook. And Fox News is the problem because they bring misinformation, and it is rather like a blog, a broadcast rather than social media.
¿Queréis una apertura?
So let's open the floor to the audience. If anybody wants to ask anything, and we can deep dive in this. Is there anyone that has a remark, concern, anything? Now it is time. Don't be shy.
¿Hay algún micrófono para que podamos?
Is there any mic? Yes, thank you.
Sí, por el streaming. No, es que se ha quedado el contexto de nanomedicina un poco.
No, I think that the nanomedicine context was a little bit in the air.
¿Verdad?
It is true about quantum medicine. It's true that there exist several books that give explanations about consciousness and based on quantum mechanics. That doesn't really entail that many of us are not interested in quantum mechanics when applied to biology, for instance, in terms of the creation of future quantum mechanics computers. I think that this is very valuable. Actually, 3 weeks ago, a group from Oxford that collaborates with Calico, a Google company, and this brings us back to pioneering medicine being carried out by companies that have the money from California, which has a very dark side, but also a very positive side because they have many multidisciplinary teams. It's less conservative than traditional medicine or science, where your own colleagues might steal your ideas. It is not terrible. It is not all terrible within this ecosystem. It's more diverse, and they have managed to create proteins that can be manipulated by magnetic fields, and this could be interesting when it comes to the way that drugs go to different parts of the body. And with this quantum computing boom that we have, even though we do not have quantum computers, there are many people who are interested in quantum processes, complex processes, biology processes, and these things were not of interest earlier. And there are many quantum processes, not only in the brain, but in many other processes, because the quantum process plays with time, the inbound, outbound, and we are trying to develop experimental systems where we can, and this is going to take us a long time. It is very difficult, but this is something that we should not give up on. We should not stop studying quantum mechanics, because I think it is important, because biology, it comes about at the nanometer size, and polymers can actually access quantum states in very short lapses of time, and then can come in and out. And this is why, for instance, we use so little energy, and there are many of us trying to prove this. And maybe this boom related to quantum computing, with all the market related aspects of all this, because it's not clear that a quantum system that does not have the cause and effect that we know is actually going to help us doing computing as we wish. But maybe it could help us. And this is why I got a little bit upset, but because I think that we should not give up on quantum mechanics and in biology.
Can I?
Sure.
Try.
You can try.
I never said that we should give up.
I know, but I wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Because maybe a lo mejor aquí en la audiencia el futuro.
Because maybe here in the audience we have the person who will solve the problem of quantum mechanics and biology. Who knows?
What I was saying is not that.
I know.
It's that there is real research which is fundamental and important for society, and which will change the world in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, that will cure diseases. We do not know. What we know is that there is a delay, always. So the moment you take the money from fundamental research, you jeopardize what's happening in the future. it's automatic, always. You disagree? You disagree?
You want to answer?
Yeah, I continue. So what I was saying about biology and all that, I actually wrote a book about that, suggesting that we should continue, obviously, to look into these things. It's part of science. What I was saying, because the question was about communicating science, is that there are ideas that you can pick out of these topics and use them wrongly. And that's where it's very difficult to...
Maybe even just terms, not even ideas.
I mean, usually when you use the word quantum, it means that the word that comes next doesn't mean what it should. It's like quantum vacuum is not vacuum.
No, it's not.
It's not. We agree on something.
Yeah, we're... No, but I think it's, I continue being controversial because one of the problems of science, I think, and that
Sorry about that. One of the problems of communicating science, in my view, is all scientists giving each other a clap on their back, and then they go back to the lab and they stab each other on the back. And I will be very controversial here, but in the case of vaccines in the United States, of course, there are many people enduring a very complicated health system to which they do not have access with many companies. And I do medical devices in my lab. And sometimes when you cannot do something in Europe, you need to bring it to the United States because a private hospital can use it with patients, and you will be able to use it. And this is what you're told in my field. And I know that many people have a certain mistrust for this, and it is very easy for the media, and to a certain extent, and here comes the controversy, maybe the anti-vaccines would have helped us have better vaccines if there is not a part of the society that is very critical against something that you're being imposed on and that you don't understand because you lack the education or because you're hearing crazy things in certain books. You can also tell yourself, I don't want to use this vaccine. First of all, I cannot go to the hospital on a regular basis, and now they want to have me have a vaccine that I do not know what it is about, and they're driving me crazy with all this information. And the rest of us benefit from this because they force us to demonstrate that vaccines are safe. So it is much more complex, and society is always complex, is always difficult. So this idea of being rational from scientists is very totalitarian. You cannot have everyone think the same way that you do. Let them think whatever they wish, and then let's find the way through. And then there is a lot of inequality in terms of economy, in terms of knowledge, and this is not going to go away. And now this is a bigger problem because inequalities are growing and people mistrust scientists. How could they trust scientists? Did you see the list of scientists that went to the Epstein Island and they went to go get money because we do not have money? It is very complex. The relationship between scientists, the relationships from scientists and the rest of the people. So I tend to be very upset when I see all scientists agreed and they say, and I know that you didn't say this, but speaking is exaggerating. You cannot say anything without exaggerating. The reality is infinite and you can only focus on one thing. But I think that this raises a problem until scientists become more humble, more honest, and we are more open to hard debates. We're going to be set aside.
Well, spontaneous applause if you want. That's fine.
Bueno.
With some things I agree, with others I am not. Well, I just said this to be controversial, you know.
Es cierto que hay cierta
It's true that there is a certain mistrust of science, and this is not only related to the way that scientists act, but also the idea of communicators, of this idea of presenting science as a monolithic thing. And it is just the opposite. To give trust on science is not about you need to believe this because it is science, but rather to state that science is based on skepticism. And it's just the opposite, to convey that you can question, you can challenge what science says if you have evidence against what it has been said. At the same time, when it comes to vaccines, I think that this has to do with a political process that has to do with removing all credibility from elites that are not convenient for certain governments. In the case of Trump's administration, this is extremely clear. They always hold a position against the academia because the academia is progressive, and they believe that the academia is one bloc and a coalition, which is not true. The most conservative just want to go and earn money from the financial system. They do not want to stay in the academia. But that left aside, there's a political pressure that supposedly comes from the universities, from the scientific environment and ecosystem.
Do you think that the intellectual movement in science is simplification? It's a complex reality, and we simplify things. We try to extract some information, and we try to go the other way around. So let's go back to reality to see if some of these things can be applied or not. Do you think that maybe, as Sonia was saying, this could bring us to some kind of excessive simplification of the vision that society has about scientists? It's like we're here with a single-minded truth and we have to be respected because we have a method that in our field works.
Absolutely. I think it is the wrong path to take, and I think that it is also false in the sense that we all know very well the issues with all the data and the limits that exist, and we should be able to convey this better to the general public. But especially when this goes into the media and journalism, and journalists try to convey science, they convey this as if this were reality, and this is not reality. It is just an interpretation and approach to reality, the best that we have come up with up until now, but it is not the exact, precise reality. And this is something that you cannot leave aside, because otherwise you're lying.
I think that we'll have time for one or two questions.
Sí, por supuesto.
The question is why you applauded before. Is it because what Sonia said kind of fitted your intuition that you're allowed to think what you want, that people are allowed to be critical of things, which is fine. I completely agree with that. And the counter-example that kills this idea in 1 second is, if you need surgery, will you go ask your butcher? Will you go ask the baker? Will you go ask somebody in the street who says, I have my opinion about that? No, you won't. So in general, and that's kind of what I was saying before, the main role of that kind of scientific education is to be able to criticize, not to think that you're right all the time. That maybe some people know things better than you. Not all of them. And there is something which is called university, which is called academia, which is called research, in which the individual sometimes stabs the neighbor in the back. But if you look in the long run, there are some things that are correct that emerge from there. So it's not that easy to say that everybody should be allowed to think anything. Yeah, fine. If you don't want this thing or that, fine. If you don't want to learn this thing or that, fine. That's fine by me. But there are things that we've inherited that others have spent their whole lives doing, sometimes for the sake of humanity, sometimes against, that's fine. But this is the kind of stuff that we should continue to have in order, in 200 years' time, all the fake news of today, they will be forgotten. That's wrong. The ones that will prevail are the ones that were found by science, not the other way around. That's impossible. And please don't applaud. Otherwise, it's wrong what I said.
No, applaud.
¿Quién se lanza?
So who breaks the ice? There is a question here on the first row, I think. Yep. Hello, good evening. There is something that I'm concerned a little bit about, that is money, funding, running or chasing the money. Well, the time that we're living in, how can we have an ethical control by scientists to say, well, I'm going to research on this, I won't research on that, I'm not going to get into here, it doesn't matter, I have to be a peasant or I have to have hens that lay eggs. I mean, how can science control itself in this sense? Ethically, I mean.
It is extremely difficult because all of us, when we deal with issues, you need to do the ethical assessments of your work, but it is just what you have said. It depends on incentives and the money. We have spoken about science as a part of the progress of humanity, but it depends on who's paying it. On the Manhattan Project, they built a bomb. Is this progress for humanity? Well, from that, we created PET scanners and other things that were good for science, but science belongs to the payer, and you see many problems arising from that. And also, you can name, when we think about the example of the Manhattan Project, you only find one person, a Polish scientist, that when he realizes that the Germans won't be able to build the atomic bomb, he leaves and he starts using radiation for medicine in England, and the rest of them remain there. And then following day, the soldiers came and said, thank you very much, we are taking the bomb from you. And here we are. So when we talk about the ethics when it comes to science, well, of course, everyone wants to be ethical, but it is very difficult in such changing systems like this one, where there is little money, where people need to earn a living. These are complex problems, and the important thing is to discuss ethics and to be very open about the research that you're carrying out, and it has never been easy when it comes to ethics in science. I would also like to answer to that question as well, because we do not want to provide a cynical perspective. Of course, science, it is an undertaking that is a human undertaking, like any other. But there are different cases that we can compare. In psychology, for instance, we see that there were a couple of cases that led to a full reform when it comes to the ethical assessments. And you need to compare that not with the ideal, but with the way that politicians are acting, or the military are acting, or the police forces are acting, or the business people are working. And when you do that comparison, you see that science is rating really up in the score when it comes to the ethics, and always with this idea of having to improve in this field as in any others. But I think that we are way better than the politics, for instance. We think more, we discuss ethics more, and in that sense I agree with you, but I think that it depends also greatly on the circumstances.
Estamos terminando.
Well, we're almost done because we have to finish. You see that we are just getting started. There are many things to say, but one of the things that we started with is what questions we're asking ourselves, and that's one of the engines of science. But that engine needs wheels, it needs a road, and that limits speed, direction, and an engine can't decide on its own what road to hit, or if it's going through a path that is on a road. So I think that as a pending task, we need to see how to make it compatible, that idealism, to say, well, let's answer the big humankind, the big questions of the humankind, but we should say, but yeah, in a context that sets ethical limitations, funding limitations, or even survival as people. I mean, tomorrow I have to feed my children, and if I decide to investigate one thing or another, maybe I won't be able to do it. Sometimes it's not just greed, as you said. We just can have a cynical vision. There's a survival as professionals. So I'll just ask you for a final thought, or to encourage people to continue with the conversation, just to close today's roundtable.
En el orden inverso, si queréis.
In reverse order, if you want. So we'll get started by our colleague.
Well, I trust that science has self-correcting mechanisms that no other discipline has. You don't see those in religion, in other human undertakings, such as the politics. And I think that it is the only thing that we have. And as Christophe was saying, we keep using electricity, and we do not question about the fact that many things in our life are based on the progresses that we have made in the past.
Many disciplines that humankind created that allowed us to see further than what we saw before, to discover things that we could not see, could not detect, that we made the predictions and found it afterwards, meaning that there is a path towards a bigger understanding. And there is another thing. Science actually brings joy, as well as some stabs in the back, but joy as well. And the joy of understanding, the joy of being on a path that kind of feels right is extremely, extremely nice. And I think it widens the imagination, and it makes you feel better on a daily basis.
Sí, claramente
Clearly, science connects you to the deeper questions and the way you experience the world that you live in. And this is something that you cannot do through other means. Maybe art could be close to science in this way. But when I was listening to my colleagues here, I was thinking of Paul Verhoeven, a philosopher on science, who said that whether we like science or not, and no matter what we think of it, science, and he was talking about technology rather, has changed so much the world around us, including climate change, that has been made possible by technology. It's something that is unavoidable. The science has sort of painted the world, and scientists are the ones who can really create the solvent that can allow us to solve this paint and allow us to live in the 21st century. And we need to reflect on the type of science that we want to do, and that allows us to overcome this enormous crisis that we're going through, and maybe allow us to create a more human science that will not destroy the world.
So we're at this forum for this. We'll keep on chit-chatting in Valladolid from tomorrow on about these topics and other topics, and I think it's really worthwhile, as our three speakers have said, to keep on talking in order to move on towards a better world. Thank you very much for coming along. No.